We're here today with Frederick Brown, the Director of Strategy and Development for Learning Forward. Welcome, Frederick.
Thank you.
Can you tell us, in your opinion, what constitutes effective mentoring?
So when I think of mentoring, I'm going to think of it for both teachers and leaders. And I'll think back to my time as a first-time teacher and as a first-time principal. So as a first-time teacher, I recall being in a building, given some materials. Had my classroom list. I had 4 walls, a desk, lots of seats, not an actual idea of what I wanted to do. Even though I had graduated from university with honors and had experienced great learning in that environment, when I got to my classroom, I was like, this is it. It's really going to happen. So I was very excited. When I was a first-time principal, same sort of experiences at the university. And I got into my building, and here's an interesting story. The custodian of the building handed me the keys because he was the person who held all the keys to everything in the building. And the principal who was there before was going to introduce me to the custodian because she said that it's probably best if I'm there during this part of your transition. But for whatever reason, she couldn't make it, so I was there alone. And as he's handing me the keys, he's literally crying. He's saying to me, if you're half the principal she was, just half, and he couldn't finish his sentence because he was just so distraught that she was leaving and I was coming in. And so that was my welcome to that environment. And in both cases, I realized I needed someone to just help me through this critical phase of my induction into this new environment in both those cases. So for the teacher, one of the things I think is really important is, as a brand new teacher coming into a school, there must be someone else in that environment with whom you can have interactions, who can help you think through some of the details of what it means to have a new classroom and to work with a new set of children, to get you situated in that new context in which you find yourself. So regardless of what type of pre-service training you've had, the school environment where you may find yourself may be quite different than what you experienced before. So having access to that person is really important. The principal, serving as the instructional leader for that building, should also be a support system for you as well. So in the case of a principal, the same thing. There should be a fellow principal with whom you're connected, who can help you through those critical periods. We call that first year in the principalship. There's what we call these showstopper behaviors. And these are things that if you don't do them quite right, everything may fall apart. And it's so easy to make a critical mistake early on that may damage you from that point forward. And so helping individuals think through what those showstopper behaviors might be and giving them the support to make sure that they overcome those obstacles.
They're very powerful lessons at an individual level. What changes at the school level when you introduce effective approaches to mentoring?
Well, as I understand the Australian system, so you have a lead teacher, highly accomplished, and these are individuals who have a certain level of expertise around teaching learning in your schools. And what's wonderful about the way we think about teacher leadership in our country is one can aspire to be the best teacher ever in one school without necessarily becoming an assistant principal or principal, but just the best teacher, because really, in a sense, that's one of the most important positions in the school. So if you can create a school where you have these lead teachers or teacher leaders who have a real good sense of what good instruction looks like, and they're able to work with your graduate teachers and those who are coming just into the profession and into the school, and you create a learning culture where ideas can be shared across and among those individuals, then you have the beginning elements of what I talked about at the conference yesterday as a learning school. A school where learning is starting to happen at scale and be sustained throughout that environment.
How formal and structured should this mentoring be within a school setting?
I think it should be informal and formal. Informal in the sense that as a teacher, I should feel it should be very comfortable for me to be able to go and have a conversation with any teacher around any particular topic area and not feel like it's going to be used against me or I'll be judged because I had that question. But at the same time, a formal structure should exist so that we know that at least X number of conversations are happening or people are really getting an opportunity to engage in a conversation, because there are times when you don't know what questions to even ask. And so in a very formal mentoring structure, you can make sure that certain topics are covered, because what may happen during those conversations is a teacher may say, oh, I didn't even think to ask that question, but I'm glad that you've brought that up. So if you allow for both, I think you can basically address all the types of learning needs that individuals might have.
Are there a couple of practical examples you could give to our teachers or our school leaders about how to introduce this into their school?
So when you think about introducing a mentoring program or mentoring system into a school, one thing that's really practical is just to ask teachers, so what do you see as your own needs, your own learning needs? So if someone's coming into a school setting first year, and mentoring should at least be 1 full year, but preferably 2 or 3, what do you see as your own learning needs? What do the data tell you are gaps in your own learning? As you work with your team and your colleagues, what are they doing that you're not doing that you want to do better? And these are the kinds of things that can start to inform sort of the kind of the context and the context of the mentoring. So I would suggest one practical solution is to figure out very quickly what the learning needs are of the individuals within this program, and make sure that you create a system that supports those gaps.
In your observation, what have been some of the direct outcomes for schools that have embraced this type of effective and constructive approach to mentoring?
Well, one thing that you'll see very quickly is teachers will have a very good sense of what effective teaching looks like in their context. I think the standards, the national standards, do a wonderful job of painting a picture of effective teaching in a general sense. But there's some elements when you start to go down to the 10,000 kilometer level or the 5,000 kilometer level that are quite different depending on your context. So I say one thing is it brings to life sort of the national standards within a context of one school.
So how can we use effective mentoring practices within schools to try and shift the focus from assessment of performance to a focus on ongoing improvement?
Well, there's obviously a place for accountability and performance measures. So that's something that's going to be a part of your system. It's a part of our systems throughout the states. But the reality is, if you look at a new teacher coming into an environment and you have this understanding that this is a new individual about to engage in a practice, that even though he or she has been trained, it's still new practice. So the focus absolutely has to be on improvement. There's a interesting documentary that I had a chance to be a part of when I was at the Wallace Foundation, and it was called The Principal Story. And it told the story of 2 school principals in Illinois, one in Springfield, Illinois, one of our states, and the other one in Chicago. And the principal in Chicago had a teacher who was a kindergarten teacher, and this was her transition year into first grade. And what was interesting was she, although not a brand new teacher, was still being mentored as a new teacher in first grade. And the principal really took a look at it as, I'm here to support you, because this teacher was having great difficulty managing first grade as compared to kindergarten. But by focusing the conversations in a supportive developmental sort of structure versus a accountability structure, she was able to offer her A, lots of suggestions on how to improve her practice. B, she was able to give her a mentor teacher who was able to come into her classroom and model good practice for her. So that became another strategy. And she used several other strategies in order to support that teacher in her practice. But as a school leader, then there still comes that time, and it happened in this movie, where even though you have a learning culture for both your kids and your teachers, in this particular case, because that teacher was not having success after all of those suggestions and after everything that was tried, that the principal felt that she could no longer keep her in that setting. So in that case, accountability worked its way back into the system, because in the end, the principal had to do what was best for kids. And when kids were in an environment where it wasn't healthy for them, and their learning was not happening at the levels where it should have, the principal needed to make the adjustment. But to step backwards a bit, again, she came at it, as we all should, particularly with new teachers, from a developmental supportive viewpoint, because we want to make sure that we give people opportunities to learn. This is a tough job. You know, it's one of the hardest jobs that you'll find, and it takes time to really master this craft. So it's really important that we give people opportunities to learn.
So finally, what advice would you give to schools that are considering adopting an approach to mentoring? What's the key message you'd like to leave them with?
I would say, please make sure that you come at it with this supportive mindset, this developmental mindset. If possible, mentoring should go beyond just the first year. It should be just part of the culture of the school. It shouldn't be seen as a separate event. It just should be seen as we're a learning school, everyone's at a different level, and if we can create an environment where everyone's learning is extended, no matter if they're first year or lead, then you, again, have the attributes of what we might call a learning school. So it's not just for those new folks, it's for everyone.
Thank you, Frederick.
Absolutely.